The first track, Farm in the City, obviously opens with an auction, and the farmer is doing the singing. How did you then piece the sounds behind that?
Well, that one was the easiest one because it is fairly orchestral. It's pretty straightforward. We just took a big Baroque theme, which is yadun, 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 it's a cliche Baroque theme, and lengthened it out and added different, we're playing with time all the time in a sense, so we're adding different Italian 8-bits throughout in the orchestral sections.
And this idea of the auction and the sort of journey through life that's alluded to at the end, I mean, how did you see that and the Italianate Baroque orchestral arrangement interacting?
Well, you know, I dedicate the song to Pasolini, or the memory of Pasolini. I was interested in his death. There's a lot of confusion about all of it, and I've read several conflicting reports. Where was he murdered? Was it a gang? Was it a single boy? Was it a rape? How was it done? But I thought, well, this is interesting in another way. I'm a fan of his films anyway. I can just kind of imagine a scenario. And I just went on from there.
So how did you approach making this album?
It's a very difficult process, and it takes me a long time to write. It's just a waiting game with me, and it happens very slowly, and I piece it all together very slowly. I don't have any particular agenda in mind when I begin, you know.
But you start always with the words.
I start with the words because the reason I did this time anyway, I mean, it might not always be thus, but I have done the last two albums because there has been this thing in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, maybe longer for all I know, because I'm not that up with things, but where tracks have come to the fore, everybody thought, well, the lyrics don't matter, just get on with the track.
The groove.
Yeah, but the problem with that was that all the tracks started to sound just like tracks, you know, and other people's tracks and other people's tracks. And quite honestly, this is an easy victory most of the time. So I thought, well, no, I'm going to work on the words first, get that right, and they'll kick off everything. They'll kick the track off, and that's what will make it sound different enough. And so every single lyric I'd hone down, a particular sound will relate to it, and I'll search for that sound so that even the sounds in the album are honed down. Everything is almost in blocks.
Your voice seems to have risen in its register since the early hits.
I know that. It's because of the material again. The material kicks it off. It's also lower, I will say, on this album than it has been as well, so they should take that into account. I mean, Farm in the City I pitched in an E because I wanted all the resonance from the strings, but it could have done with being a little higher, but it has a great warmth that way because the orchestra is in that area. No, I wanted the febrile feeling for a lot of this stuff, and especially Cockfighter. It would be no good if I'd have had it down when I meant to be screaming, yet I didn't want to scream because too emotional, you're dead. Too deadpan, you're dead.
The Cockfighter, which includes those excerpts from The Trial of Adolf Eichmann,
yeah,
and Queen Caroline. How did that track come about?
That was, in a sense, the most difficult track because, in the end, it's dealing with the Holocaust, in a sense. But once again, you've had a series a year or so ago of people just putting out knee-jerk reaction songs like, Dirty Nazi, or rapping this over and over again. This kind of a thing is so unsayable. It can't be approached like that. You just can't think of this kind of a thing like that. And basically, in all my songs, I'm creating a character for each song, maybe an extension of myself in a sense, but I try to imagine a man having a nightmare, and the song begins like this. Also, the Cockfighter, choosing this kind of an image as well. Is it gross? Does it mean something as crude as Cockfighter, get it, Cockfighter, because it's an erotic song as well. I try to bring in erotic elements, national eroticism, things like that. So by the end, when it's really playing with time, I won't explain the whole song because I don't like talking too much about it, but I took two trials, basically. One that happened in the 1820s. It was a very big scandal here, so it was in the national conscience anyway. And of course, the famous Eichmann trial. So that the questions that are being asked to Eichmann are from one trial, and the answers are from another trial, from another period, meaning that you're really throwing away the idea of the law, and you're talking about, no matter what he said, it would be unsayable anyway. So you're talking about something that really can't be talked about, and sneaking up on it in a sense.
And you also got some truly shocking industrial noises. There's a bit in that track when you almost leap out of your chair when you hear it, when that very industrial-sounding percussion comes crashing in.
Yeah.
That was to enhance the sense of horror and
Oh yes,
shock.
absolutely. And it's I had 3 percussionists playing live, and we picked all of that stuff very carefully the day before. I went through it with them, all the things that they had, and these things called Engelhard beaters. If you hear them live, they're like having tinfoil on your teeth. You know that one. It's really, really the most frightening sound I've ever heard. You know.
There is the most extraordinary range of instruments on this album. I mean, that, that we've just been talking about is, I suppose, at one extreme of abrasiveness, and then you've got that very warm sound of the organ in the Methodist Central Hall. Where did the idea of using that come in?
Well, I've always used the organs at different periods of my career anyway, and very early on with the Walker Brothers I used one, and that was at the Empire, Leicester Square. We went and recorded that one. Then
on which Walker Brothers?
This is a track called Archangel. It's very old, I don't know if anyone would remember it, and then we did an album called Night Flights in the 70s, and we used the Albert Hall one there. But this time we were able to record this Victorian organ. See, the organ represents something, always to me. It's rather an organized religion idea, a view of things. So it's actually, most times, it's the enemy to me. It's this big looming, gigantic thing. We recorded it there and got a beautiful recording of it, I think. And it also enabled us not to have to resort to the synthesizer. We do use the synthesizer now and then, but we wanted a depth recording, and the synthesizer always gives you a rather flat recording by its very nature.
You seem to have had this very clearly mapped out or sonically visualized in your mind before you recorded it. Was that how it was, or was there a certain amount of trial and error here?
Oh no, there was trial and error. I know the sound I want to get. I mean, basically I understand what that is for whatever I'm going to do, but I work through it with the musicians that I hire. That's the great gift of getting the exact guys, and I took a long time for it, and knowing that these guys will follow you into hell, and they'll really dig deep for you, and they did.
And were you consciously trying to, there are some extraordinary sort of transitions and juxtapositions in the track. One that struck me was the Bolivia 95, where you start with that quite slow, almost conventional sounding guitar riff, and then the whole song dissolves into an extraordinary array of percussion and woodwind.
Yes.
How did you see that song developing? What were you trying to get at there?
It's a man who's talking to the corpse of Che Guevara, who was murdered in Bolivia. But I was trying to summon up that kind of atmosphere. What would it be like on a night like that? What would it be like in this strange hut somewhere?
You seem to have been inspired by some fairly weighty and grim kind of historical data here for this album.
Oh, that's me. That's me. Yeah. Oh.
That is truly the case, that these are the sort of things that move you to write.
They're the things that kick off other things that I'm interested in. And they're not political, particularly, at all. They're, in a sense, a device as well. Although with something like the Cockfighter, you have to handle it with, like I said, a certain amount of sensitivity, because that is not a device, but the others, are.
Superficially, perhaps, there doesn't appear to be a tremendous amount of humour in this album. It does actually sound quite heavy, quite intense.
Well, I think there is black humor in it, and maybe in a Beckett sense or something like that. So I think that's very much a part of it, because if you don't use that, you're dead in this kind of thing. It just it does come off a lot, because a lot of people try to think, well, it must be serious, and the actual thing that doesn't make my record serious is that element in it. There's always that hanging around. It's not a laugh riot working on these things. When I think it has to be there.
You've lived in London almost continuously with a 2-year break in Scandinavia since the middle 60s. Has your sort of living here in Britain or in Europe, has this been an important kind of sense of sort of nourishment musically for you? I mean, could you have made this record in America?
Oh, no, no. No, I don't think I could have at all. My records have a European sound. There are a lot of people who say my records sound more European than European records. I've always been influenced by that, but I don't think it's a Eurocentric sound. I think it's a dream of Europe that I had when I lived in America, that I look forward to coming here, and I don't know, homogenized it or something like that. So it's kind of out on its own.